Hello, welcome to the CyberDudes podcast. It is episode 9. I am Robin, and he is...
Omar Sangre.
How are you doing, Emma?
Not too bad. A wild weekend in my world. A lot of jiu-jitsu action. I'll try not to interweave that arcane bit of nerddom into this one, right? I don't like having the streams mix. It's not professional. So, but yeah, that was
No cross-pollination.
It was a banner weekend for me, honestly.
Good stuff.
My only gripe was I'm an old man, Robin, and I can't be staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning Eastern time for any reason. Yeah, I can't do that. I'm waking up in an hour or two because the baby's probably up. So it's not.
Yeah.
Oh, zapped, shattered, as you all say across the pond. So.
Knackered. Yeah, I'm good. Good. It's a muggy, rainy day, so just trying to keep cool, really.
It felt like home, I would imagine, right? Like, how is this not?
It's normal, yeah, but it's normally cooler than this. It's normally not quite as. It's not like, oh, it's raining outside. Oh, and I'm sticky as well. It's it can get it gets gross here. Anywho, I'm all right otherwise though. I mean, been watching the Premier League this morning. That ended well for me, which was nice. I've got a new iPad set up with our episode plan here, so I'm hoping things will be a little bit smoother. I won't actually have to do quite as much editing that I had to for last episode, because that took a veritable eternity. I had quite a few problems. Every single time I tried to clip out like a little pause, the platform we'd use, well, it comes up on the watermark, it's Riverside. Slight shade if anyone from Riverside is watching. Every single time I tried to take a pause out, it would spin for 2 or 3 seconds, and it didn't matter what platform, or not platform, it didn't matter what laptop I did it on, what browser I did it on, anything like that. The performance was still slow. So we might be just doing the recording in here. I might be taking it into DaVinci and doing the recording, doing the editing in there in the future. But hey, we'll see. Yeah. Right. Our episode today is all on deepfakes. But before we get into that, it is once again the news. So, CyberDudes podcast news up to August 18th. It's been a couple of weeks since our last episode. We've had multiple stories. The weirdest 3 billion people data breach ever is one that has come out from The Verge. Now, this is something, a guy in California has filed a lawsuit against a Florida-based background check company and data broker called National Public Data. And one of the quotes from The Verge says, this is a source of a massive data leak that includes information like social security numbers and more on reportedly 3 billion people. Now, I don't think that really tracks all that well for reasons we'll talk about in a moment. But this trove of data, somebody's got into the database, scraped it all, thrown it on the dark web for sale at $3.5 million. A group called DoD US, and allegedly 2.9 billion records. But the population of the US is only 350 million. I don't know the maths on this. I'd hazard to guess there's not been 3 billion Americans since the beginning of the Social Security. So this does go to the kind of validity of the hack and the leak and what is in it and whether it's actually valid data or not, which I think is a lot of the argument for allaying people's fears about, oh my God, am I going to get my identity stolen?
I mean, are you going to get your identity stolen? Yes. Just a matter of when and what your resiliency plans are after it happens. Like our good friend, I say friend, he doesn't know who the heck we are yet. Our good friend Troy Hunt over at Have I Been Pwned, it pretty much says that, right? It's not a matter of if, but when. I'm just trying to stay at least a couple steps ahead. I don't know where they're getting the 3 bill number from. They must be counting certain records 10, 15 times. I was trying to really pour over the specifics here, but it seems as though the catchy headline is not nearly as valid as one would think, which is a good thing, but it's not a good thing when you're trying to do reliable reporting of this sort of event. I could see people going, hey, I can't even trust what the news tells me now about different breaches. So, I'd say, of course, do your due diligence, take a look. But I don't. If this had been a legitimate hack or of the equivalent of a third to maybe closer to a half, I don't know how many billions of people are we on the planet at this point. I think there would have been a little bit more a groundbreaking type reaction to it. Is my opinion.
Yeah. Well, this is it, and I think you hit the point there quite handily. And 2.9 billion records. It's a big scary number. It's kind of just sort of sexy headlines, attention grabbing sort of stuff. There's another quote from that article from The Verge saying the hacker and malware tracker VX Underground on X, Twitter, also looked at data and noted it didn't contain records for people who use data opt-out services, supporting the idea that it came from a data aggregator, which makes an awful lot of sense because whenever you go onto a data opt-out service, one that I've used is Incogni, Discover Card have their own in there. You can see all the records that kind of come up, and there'll be multiple of you on the basis of multiple addresses that you've been associated with. So if you're moving every 12 months, for example, there'll be multiple records that are associated with you. But also, it sounds like kind of what has happened to a degree here as well is the equivalent of marketers scraping off LinkedIn and kind of just making guesses on roughly correlated information to actually create a database of stuff. There's nothing that's to say that that's actually accurate.
It's a little scary. It's scary. It rattles the sabers, but it also goes contrary to something that any professional in this industry tries to stay away from as much as possible unless they're trying to sell some books, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. As long as you can, just the facts, nothing but the facts, ma'am. If you can go that route, I think it instills a bit more trust in the sources and a bit more trust in any remediation activities that are advertised or sent your way. This does no help to anyone except for maybe the fact that, hey, data aggregators are a thing. They're horrible. I don't have a strategy or tactic for how to combat them. It's just one of those facts of life. But they're a thing.
And this is the biggest problem. Yeah, data brokers are. It's an awful industry. The biggest problem with this is that they have absolutely no permission to scrape any of this data. So quite frankly, I mean, this is a national public data. They're being sued in California, but this is a Florida-based company, and quite frankly, this is one of the most stereotypically low-life and egregious examples I can think of the kind of avaricious behavior that I've heard come out of Florida. And that honestly is, I think that's saying something. Also, I mean, if you're a Floridian and you're offended by this, I am not sorry, to be honest. There's a reason why the Deep South disowned you as a state.
Oh my lord!
This is the Florida really man of cybersecurity stories.
And it's like and they pick the wrong state to do it against. Really, like of all the states that you're gonna pick a fight on this battlefield with, California's not the one, baby. It's just not right. Because they're one of the few states that actually has something resembling a cohesive take on their citizens' privacy, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, any Florida, of those specific states, you don't want to screw with regard to that, and Massachusetts as well. I don't think you want to screw with them from a data security perspective. Yep. I don't think frankly, I'm not worried necessarily about this. I think to your point earlier, you got to accept this as a reality of when, not if you are worried about your credit. I mean, the advice that is floating around on the net at the moment is, make sure that you know how to freeze your credit when if you are worried about it and when something does start looking odd or suspicious, keep an eye on your bank statements. I mean, honestly, I only a few weeks ago, I was having somebody trying to buy concert tickets through SeatGeek with a credit card that I seldom use, but I was checking through the app and said, okay, that's not right, that's fraud. So that all got sorted out. But it's all about being aware and just keeping tabs on what it is that's going on with regards to your financials. Another story towards the start of the news cycle relates back to mid-July. Microsoft says Delta ignored Satya Nadella's offer of help with the CrowdStrike issue. I don't want to go too deep into this one, but it goes back to what we said in the last episode. It's really more of a Delta problem than anything else. It sounds like. They're the only people who are really kicking off about this. Next one we've got, Trump campaign says its internal messages hacked by Iran. Now, this has been all over the news. Absolutely not surprising in any way, shape or form. If we remember back to 2016, the Democratic National Convention's emails were all hacked. Microsoft raised this, that over the past several months we have seen emergence of significant influence activity by Iranian actors. 3 news outlets in the States were approached by a man known only by the pseudonym Robert, and was offered all of this material. They have all 3 of them, including, I think it includes the Washington Post and the New York Times, news outlets often accused of being left-leaning rather than right, have refused to release all of this information, probably because they think that they're going to get spanked on some sort of election tampering kind of stuff if that really happens. So some of the information that has been leaked goes into reasons as to why J.D. Vance was chosen as Trump's running mate in the upcoming election. Now, we do have a little bit of inside information on this one. We know the key reason that Vance was chosen to be Trump's running mate. And it all comes down to cost, ultimately. When you take 2016 and 2020 campaign signs and all you have to do is change P and E to V and A to get Trump Pence to Trump Vance, I mean, you're saving money on your campaign. It really is as simple as that. J.D. Vance has been chosen just as a matter of convenience, because there's no other explanation for why you choose someone who steps on so many political rakes in such a short time.
This honestly, whenever anyone asks me why I don't run for anything, I go, because this is, no. Just no. Because I can't, I'm not filtered, I'm not refined. Like, I have, some pretty ardent views on certain issues. The cost thing, man, like that's going to stick with me, honestly, Robin, where it's just, that's one of those takes I'm going to run up and tell the wife when we're done.
If you can change, turns out Roger Stone may not be the most cyber savvy man in the Trump campaign. His personal email was allegedly breached as part of the effort to target.
What do you mean, his Hotmail account, like his AOL
trove
account? Is he one of those?
Something like that. Right. I mean, it's a spear phishing / whaling attempt.
MySpace,
effectively.
MySpace. Listen, my one very lukewarm, non-scintillating take on this whole Iran stuff is, I wish the Iron Sheik was still alive. Right? Like, that character, I feel like that, he's still alive in the Twitter / X universe. I really could see an awesome, like, eyeball generating campaign if he just went full heel and said, I'm the one trying to hack into both campaigns, right, as a gag. But Iran is trying to do cyber stuff to the US. I'm flabbergasted. Like,
we never saw that coming a million miles away.
Right? Come on, man. Like, this is, and it's, And then there's news, there's tidbits where they're accusing Iran just because it came after, it was at first, at least before any of this was verified, it was just, hey, Iran, Microsoft said Iran was poking around its own environment, and then, oh, it's the Iranians, they hacked us, right? And it's just like, listen, it's, is water wet? Like, this stuff goes on all the time. Everyone's doing it to everybody. It's scarier now because it's our election, right, coming up in this country. But
Yep.
I mean, yeah, it's news, but is it? Like,
Another thing that's not really news is Texas is suing General Motors for selling driver data analytics to insurance companies. I do not want to go into this one. I'm really not sure why this has suddenly made it back into the sort of public awareness or zeitgeist, whatever it is, because this is something that's been known about for years. Your cars do rat on you, and
all the time.
That is just a thing. Turn off all of those connected functionalities. Leading carbon black industrial supplier Orion loses $60 million in a business email compromise scam. So they've been targeted by people who have hijacked presumably a supplier's email address or done a very, very good imitation of it and have lost $60 million as a result of it. This, frankly, for me, is a very real reminder that good cybersecurity is a far broader issue than just a technology one. In this particular instance, this is a remarkable lack of sound financial controls to let $60 million just go out the window.
That shouldn't even be possible, man. Like that, ultimately. The takes I've seen, I completely agree with. There should not be, like 16 people should have to sign off on something. And technologically, at least 2 or 3, preferably more, should be involved in what it would take to. Sometimes I have trouble zelling people, Robin, right? And it seems harder than and it's definitely not for no $60 million. This is bonkers to me.
This one, so there was one, a similar one several months ago. I remember reading about, this is the real trouble with small town banks. This particular story from a few months ago showed a similar lack of sort of financial and corporate governance. A CEO of said small town regional bank transferred 43 million of customer deposits, and as a result of being caught out with one of these scams. And there was no checks and balances. There was simply his authority. That is a gross dereliction of duty from everybody involved, not just from the CEO, from his team saying, or maybe in this case actually not saying, maybe he just had absolute authority over it, but that is a gross organizational screw up in there.
You know what my hot take is on that one? If we're throwing it back, who the hell signed off on that person's controls? Right? I want some auditing companies that get yoked up and looked at hard. Somebody looked at a program that allows that and said everything's fine here. That should be illegal as well.
Absolutely. Black Hat was a week or two ago. Lots of edgy, scary, highly improbable attacks demonstrated there, as there is every single year, and all of them make the news. We've got tricky web timing attacks are getting easier to use and abuse. But this one is so James Bond, and I don't think it's even worth worrying about in a practical sense. Watch how a hacker's infrared laser can spy on your laptop's keystrokes. This is all the kind of thing that sounds really, really cool and gets attention and grabs headlines, but it's never going to happen to your average person. So kind of be wary of that, really, I would say. Finally, Microsoft's AI can be turned into an automated phishing machine. Less unlikely.
Who would have thought?
Final story here. Ferrari executive foils deepfake plot by asking a question only CEO Benedetto Vina could answer. This was so smart. I will give massive kudos to anyone who has this level of smarts to do this. So ultimately, we're going back into July, mid-morning on a Tuesday back in July. Ferrari executive receives multiple unexpected text messages, seemingly from their CEO, Benedetto Vigna. talking about big acquisition that's being planned, need your help. The ruse continues. Be ready to sign a non-disclosure agreement that our lawyer is going to send to you. The Italian market regulator and the Milan Stock Exchange has already been informed. Make sure to be ready to cooperate with all of this. Now, this was done initially via text, but ended up on phone call. Now, the voice impersonating Vigna was incredibly convincing, apparently. Spot on imitation of the chap's southern Italian accent. The deepfake of the scammer here was explaining that they were calling from a different number because there was confidential matters to be discussed. They may face snags with regards to Chinese elements involved in the supposed deal and some unspecified currency hedge transaction that needed to be carried out in order to perform this. So at this point, this executive is getting suspicious. This is odd. So says, sorry, Benedetto, I need to identify you. And this is friggin' genius. And I would encourage anybody to have this level of skepticism when they're being asked strange things by people that they think that they know. Pose the question, what was the title of the book that you had recommended to me just a few days earlier? Straight up, only something that CEO could have answered, and with that call, line went dead, that call's done. But the real problem here, and I've alluded to it, is that this was a deep fake powered scam that went on. A cloned version of Benedetto Vigna's voice used in order to fool people who have authority to provide information or perform actions which would have perpetuated the scam. And deepfakes is what our episode today is all about. So what we're going to do, we're going to look into what deepfakes are, how they actually work, how these AI generated voices, images actually are produced. And we'll look into how these artifacts are used, why they're so effective, and the cyber risks that are involved within them, because there are plenty. We'll then go into a little bit about how to spot some of these deepfakes. There are techniques that you can use. I've got a couple of favourite little things to look for, but let's first go back to the origin of deepfakes. So what these things actually are, for starters. This is AI-generated synthetic media. This is procedurally generated stuff that alters images or videos, and this can replace one person's likeness completely with another. The same can be done with voice. But the point is that this is very clever technology, works using GPUs, or the graphical processing units, the kind of stuff that NVIDIA and AMD have been making billions of dollars developing and selling. But it's a really kind of clever way as to how this works. Have you looked into how these models actually generate the content? It's smart.
It's pretty awesome, and it's also the broader commercial applications of generating deepfakes is something I know we're going to get into a little bit later, but that's the thing that, surprisingly, even before I knew we were going to hit this as a topic, because again, thank goodness to Reddit, right? Where you know, chat bots and companion bots and the overlapping, you know, places where that and deepfakes meet, the seedy places of the internet. Yeah, but the tech is pretty neat, and it's also, what's sad here is that it's there's positive uses for it as well. Sadly, the negative ones get a lot of the credit here, or a lot of the ink. Right, we're doing a takedown of them now because it's their cyber implications, but the tech is pretty awesome. You're correct.
Yeah, it works on this basis. There's a basis of this called generative adversarial networks, and this is ultimately you have two opposing computer models, one of which has learned off a very large database of content that it's been fed in order to say, here is the sort of stuff that we would like you to replicate. Here is what it all looks like. This is so that you have all of the baseline. And then it's prompted to generate something new. So it will take, some of the early ones took existing images, they introduced random noise on a iterative basis to change the fundamentals of the image. The images are changed on an iterative basis to a point at which eventually there is a new image. Then it's fed into a model that's working against the generating model. Something that is basically trained to call bullshit. So this adversarial model looks at the image and tries to find inconsistencies, tries to find stuff that doesn't look right that would indicate that it's a fake, and makes a guess, says, yes, it is fake, no, it isn't, and works off that basis. Every time the adversarial model gets it right and says, yes, this is a fake, the generating model then has to go back and refine its approach and go better and better and better until eventually this stuff does just look like real life. It's really, really smart. So that's how we get there. And honestly, as long as time goes on, this will get better and better and better. I mean, I do remember there's probably a lot of processing power and an awful lot of rendering time went into recreating a young Carrie Fisher and Peter Cushing for 2016's Rogue One. But honestly, that resurrected iteration of Grand Moff Tarkin was impressive. And This is kind of what Hollywood's been all up in arms about as well with the SAG-AFTRA protests and strikes of last year. So really, there's a bunch of ethical and legal complications and implications that goes along with all of this.
At what point will we need original content generated? When AI is training AI how to be AI, essentially, with adversarial networks. That's, I don't think we're quite right there yet, but I love that you pulled into the conversation the SAG-AFTRA and the writer strikes and the actor strikes, right? That kind of happened concurrently and overlapped a little bit. This is what's going to happen down the road. I've always wondered what would happen if, my favorite shows never had to go off the air, but I didn't know that it was going to be AI that was going to do it. This stuff is scary for that reason at how quickly, like you said, it's gotten better because it's just training itself at this stage.
Yeah. I do always wonder whether there's an issue of reversion to the mean that will eventually come into it. So everything will end up just being the same copy of itself. It effectively tends towards something that is akin to heat death of the universe, where it all just averages out to bleh, without some sort of external input as to say, no, make that different.
Can you make an argument that we've been going down that path for the last 50 years? I mean, if we want to get real philosophical about it and where artwork has gone, this is just a logical
I don't know
extension.
whether we've got time. I don't know whether we've got time for that.
Yeah. But
plus, that could include some real proper hot takes, because actually, I don't know. I think when we got to, all right, you know what? Let's go into it a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and say it right now. A lot of 90s movies started to get very, very samey. And don't get me wrong, I love some 90s movies. Con Air, absolute, just brilliant. There's nothing quite like it. Weird thing is as well, that's on Disney now, so it's kind of like Con Air comes up next to like The Little Mermaid, which is such a bizarre juxtaposition.
It's really odd. I agree.
There was an issue. I think there was an issue where everything was starting to get a little bit samey, and then mid-2000s, something like Batman Begins, Christopher Nolan type stuff started coming along and saying, no, look, do you know what? We need to get back to some good, decent, well-done storytelling. And that all worked, and everybody got excited about superhero movies and comic books and all of that sort of stuff. 3 phases worth of Marvel, and it was great, and then we all started getting jaded with it because it all started again to become just a repetition of itself. I think this stuff goes in cycles, but I would hazard against ever being in a position where we feed literally everything to AI, because I do think it will be that heat death of the universe, heat death of culture issue.
That's a nice phrase. I like that. That's going to stick with me, Rob. Heat death of culture. It does sound like something Foucault would write now. right, where he's still alive. Like if we fed if we fed a prompt into a Foucault chatbot, which if we don't have one, that's a crime. I want to go make one. And yeah, the heat death, and it would all be about power politics and how that supports one group over another, which goes back to I think your SAG-AFTRA take there, right? If you're the owners of the GPUs, how much of a disproportionate say do you have over where that goes? That's a little scary.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's elements there of influence over what everybody sees, which is kind of why Google are in trouble from an antitrust perspective.
Yeah,
it's an issue that we talked about with regards to TikTok. But then also on the flip side of that as well, there's a scenario of you can't just go trusting literally anything else that you see that isn't those entities, because where's your credibility? Are you just some bloke who lives in the woods and screams that the earth is flat with nothing to really back it up? My biggest issue with social media has always been that it allowed fringe idiots to have a voice where they previously didn't. Okay, let's move on. So, deepfakes is an effective means of media, really, right? So, we've got replication of text, right? So pretty much everybody knows now. Feed in a prompt to ChatGPT, it'll spit some stuff out that is broadly accurate, unless it's starting to have hallucinations in terms of the conversation that you are having with it. But it can form proper sentences. It can speak English better than a lot of English speakers can do it, and write a hell of a lot better as well. All of the voice stuff is now a matter of, well, it's a real problem when it comes down to calling your bank. Because since banks hopped on the trend of voice recognition for authentication, it now completely screws that entire means of figuring out if you are who you say you are. And then the final one being the video piece, video and image. Now we're in a situation where it's people believe most what they can see with their own eyes. But if what they can see with their own eyes is fake, then how do they really know what to believe?
And then I think what you run into as well, it's a throwback to one of our news stories this cycle with the data aggregators. There's just so much data out there potentially scrapable, and you can aggregate it and train these models. You might not think that, I haven't, my face is out there, my voice is out there enough. I mean, ours, obviously, right? All you got to do is grab this podcast and you can absolutely train two AIs to sound exactly like us. But even folks not podcastically inclined, your voice is out there in some form or fashion. Yeah. And that's just, and increasingly, right? You talked about GANs, you talked about the adversarial networks. Increasingly, there's less and less material you have to feed. So they're getting better and better at replicating off of less robust training data sets. Right? They're doing validation and then doing testing almost continuously. That's the whole point of the adversarial part of the network. So your stuff's out there. Very, very easy to replicate, and terrifying, if you think about it.
Yeah. And this, I mean, obviously the more out there you are, the more at risk you are as well, which this puts CEOs and senior figures at large multinationals, but even anybody at any organization with a particular amount of authority or access to sensitive data has, it's chiefly at risk here. This actually, this Ferrari thing happened also to British advertising giant WPP. A guy called Mark Reed was imitated on a Teams call. So it was actually a full meeting where his voice was cloned, or the clone of his voice was used in order to try and fool a bunch of his colleagues. It's concerning, not least because as well, this takes advantage of a lot of quirks of human psychology. I already mentioned before, the trust in visual media piece, more likely to believe the things that you can see with your own eyes. But by the same token, if somebody knows what your leanings are, what your biases are, what you're more inclined to believe what potentially false things you are more inclined to believe based on your worldview, then content can be created to confirm that worldview, to drive you further down into the rabbit hole of those falsehoods and get you really, really entrenched in a position that just doesn't reflect reality.
YouTube's algorithm, but
Yeah,
generated on the fly based on what you've put out there.
Yeah. And this gets even more problematic on the basis that you get so far deep into that even with contradictory evidence, even with well-researched counter-arguments, it's kind of very hard to drag you out from down in that rabbit hole, in that pit of, you call it conspiracy,
Pizzagate,
deeply
baby.
held belief.
Pizzagate.
Oh, friggin' Pizzagate.
Right? That's it. But
I know.
But that's what you're talking about, right? And it's almost where then this is. It's almost we'll look back at the days of run-of-the-mill conspiracy theories that were not supported by deepfake technology and go, at least back then you could kind of sniff it out. Increasingly, as this technology refines and the use cases get a little sharper around the edges, that's going to look like the ham-fisted attempt at controlling a sector of the population that it was. Deepfakes plus that sort of thinking is going to be, sadly, a potential game changer, not a positive way.
Yep. No, absolutely not. The other side of things that we've got here as well, it's not just the voice clones of the high up people. You know, the video clones. Many of us will have seen the deepfake YouTube streams of Elon Musk touting new crypto investments, things like that. They all
Trump holding up a store with a gun, right? Wasn't that one of them? You saw that one going around?
I don't know. I did see one the other day of, it was captioned, "This is guaranteed to make everybody mad." It was a picture of a pregnant Kamala Harris with looking like she was in a relationship with Trump and his hand on her pregnant belly, and it was absolutely hilarious.
Listen, I mean, there's some funny ones too, right?
Because it will get everybody mad.
Right, the Pope with the the drip, right? The drippy Pope. I think the Vatican had to come out and say that's not the real Pope. Oh yeah, where he just had like one of those Missy Elliott puffy coats on, right, from like the mid 2000s. I mean, listen, it was funny. That's the type of Catholicism I can't say get behind because but it don't bother me much, right? So that's at least he's got some style, right? He has some chains on. He looked like every bit of a fan of the Argentine national team, like in my mind, like how they just look at all times, right? Just walking around, just going to the corner store, but just blinged out, puffy coats on, buying some bread.
Now let's finish this point, and then we'll go into the bit about the broader risks that are associated with it. I think we'll finish off with something that you have prompted my brain to grab onto there. So one of the real kind of issues then that, not least once you've got the images and they are showing fake things, but not blatantly fake things, fairly believable things. And that's the most dangerous stuff. The things that have been generated that are so close to what could happen in real life that they could be plausible. Then these things, often created to push a certain type of person's emotional buttons, then spread like wildfire on social media. And where there's not enough moderation, because there's not on the Meta platforms and on TikTok and whatever else, this kind of stuff just spreads like a virus. And it is potentially really, really damaging. And you got to then think about, if you're somebody who wants to just cause chaos, if you're in an Eastern European disinformation farm, or if you are working for the Russian state or the Chinese state and you want to sow chaos and discord within Western society, this stuff is brilliant. This is exactly the tool that you want. So people got to be wary. And that's actually what we got. That was the next piece in our plan. It's the disinformation and political manipulation piece. So one of the examples we've got here, Gabonese president in 2019, a video of President Ali Bongo was suspected to be a deepfake. It led to widespread unrest in the country and an attempted coup. So this was a potential forcible change of government off the back of a deepfake, which is wild. And it doesn't matter whether the video itself was a deepfake or not, simply the kind of questioning or the doubt that surrounded the scenario was enough to cause a real kind of issue here. So being able to detect these things is actually a really necessary ability for, I think, everybody.
I could, especially with what's coming up, right? This is so prescient because of the election. And it's hard to say this because now I sound like, some 90-year-old person. Take a beat. You see something smells a little funny, pump the brakes. Don't need to, but you have, as you said, the accelerant of social media spreading this like wildfire. And before you know it, it's taken on a life of its own. Whether or not it's fake, I think this is a great example because there's still debate on whether it was, but it had very real repercussions to the poor Gabonese society, right? And if it was a deepfake and it caused all that uproar, that's terrible. If it wasn't, and just the rumor that it was caused all that, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Right? So just the reactivity. If you can take a beat when you see something crazy like this, and I'm sure you're getting hit the same way I am, Robin. Now as the election draws near, from family members going, is this real? Is this not? They'll send you some obscure news source, and then you're going, wait a second, like, is this even, what's going on? Right? So yeah, this is a very very key topic right now.
Yeah, and that, I think that gets to the nub of one of the ways to spot this kind of stuff is to have an understanding of what kind of emotion or thought process you are supposed to have as a result of reading the content, viewing the video, seeing the image. If it comes down to triggering a negative emotion or outrage or incredulity, whatever it may be, then to your point, people need to take a beat, stop for a minute and do some independent research, just have a quick Google and, describe what is going on in the image or the media or in the article and say, is this true? Is this actually real? Because lo and behold, somewhere or another, if this thing has not happened, somebody will probably have already called bullshit on it, and they will have given you the reasons as to why it's bullshit. So other cyber risks, I mean, we've already gone into examples about this. CEO fraud, corporate espionage and fraud, right? This technology is now an incredibly useful tool in breaking into some of the largest organizations in society, but then also fooling your everyday person as well. And from a business perspective, the implications of these deepfakes is massive. We've got potential reputational damage. It's very embarrassing when something like this happens. The small regional bank that the CEO transferred the 43 million. I'm not sure any of his customers are ever going to trust that bank ever again.
That's what a bank is built on, is that they're not going to be making silly mistakes like that. Imagine, I know I'd have some questions about where to take my business.
Yeah. So reputational damage, obviously the financial fraud piece is there because that's the primary motivator for the majority of scammers, but also, from a perspective of damaging competitor credibility, or if state agents of other nations have reasons to try and damage public perception of particular institutions, then that's something that can be quite easily done in this day and age as well with all of this technology.
Sometimes, just even if the image is fake and it's proved to be fake after some time, the image still serves its purpose, right? That's where I think the root of these disinformation campaigns and just lobbing chaos grenades into the political process from foreign actors that want to see nothing but discord and divisiveness and mistrust of our democratic institutions. It does its job just by making people wrinkle their brows just for a second. It's just there's you some things you can't unsee, right? That's the old phrase. And even if you can say, "Oh, well, yeah, that was fake," the image is still there. It's done its job, right? It went through a couple of news cycles, and trust me, with the way these things are generated, there's more where that came from. So it's almost even taking a beat and realizing it might be fake could potentially not completely nullify the intended reaction or the intended outcome of the deepfake.
Yeah, definitely. This is a good point. Let's get into the personal aspects of how any individual is most likely to be targeted by this stuff just outside of general media. This is a really useful tool as well for general scams, right? Blackmail, extortion. Sextortion is a massive issue that goes on that's been going on for several years. There's huge operations involving tens of thousands of people in West Africa, which target Westerners, rich Westerners who may be susceptible to being told that we have indecent images of you and we are going to disseminate them all across the internet if you do not pay us some money. It should go without saying, but unfortunately we do have to say it because people fall for this time and time again. Never ever pay these guys any money whatsoever, regardless of what images that they say that they have of you, what information that they say that they have on you. You cannot buy a scammer's silence. You can only rent it. They will always be back for more. So what are the sort of ways that, let's put your malicious hat on, right? What are the kind of ways, the media that can be generated through deepfake technology, what are the kind of ways that you could potentially target somebody?
I think, I mean, the one now that immediately comes to mind, when my kid starts talking, that's probably the quickest way to short circuit any sort of taking a beat that I'm going to have. If she starts going to school and then I got a call, "Hey, Dad, I need something," I'm going to go nuts. I'm going to stop what I'm doing. I'm going to jump in my car and probably, hit 7 mailboxes on the way to figuring things out. That's the immediacy.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way to, it'd be the way to, get me to, goodness gracious, man. Right? I'm getting upset thinking about it right now. I'm looking at a picture of her, which is why I'm a big advocate of, like, I'm not posting anything for my kid, of my child as long as I can hold out. She might have some differing opinions when she gets old enough to have opinions, and we'll cross that bridge when it floods. But that's the quickest one for me. Or God forbid, and I think then go up the chain, right? What would get my mother to send money, right? What would get my wife? What would get some of my other loved ones to send money? Omar's hurt. Omar's somewhere. What's going on? That's the quick way, which is why these things are still salient and they work in different sort of aspects, which I know is part of what we're gonna close out the segment with. But that'd be the quickest one for me, man. What would work on you?
Oh, what's going to work on me? I don't know. I kind of struggle. There's probably going to be an instance of hubris here. There's always a lot of stuff that I look at and that's not going to get me. I can't remember the last time that I actually got by anything. I think it's going to be the things that are going to work on anybody is the age old stuff, or the age old tactics that are the induction of fear and uncertainty and doubt in people's minds to get them to stop thinking rationally and to make them panic. I don't even know why I would answer the question as to what's really going to get me and what's going to work on me, because that's just setting myself up to be targeted. I think the ways that I'd be thinking about hitting somebody, I mean, the voice clone piece is probably the most likely one that somebody is going to be on the receiving end of, outside of just a new breed of phishing email that is written and formatted correctly and properly, that has all the right kinds of language and syntax within it that you would expect from a real human being that has got a good command of the English language as a native speaker. That's the main one for me. The other side, and again, it goes now. Again, me with my evil hat on here. I think it's more difficult to use the video stuff to target individuals than it is simply to create content that you then put online that will draw in a large number of people who are trying to get rich quick. And that's the Elon Musk stuff. That's the Elon Musk video cloning kind of thing. We did see this actually a few weeks ago, though, with the North Koreans using this on a cyber education company. And they got through 3 rounds worth of interviews with a deepfake video impersonation.
At least know before it calls people back, right? Like, I'll give them kudos that their hiring process is efficient enough. They're not ghosting anyone at the very least, right? That's the latest that's going around. The old virtual waterhole there for the cyber folks in my feeds. That, it's a tough market out there. So at least know before it calls you back, right? Kudos to them. They hired a North Korean spy. You gotta take the good with the bad.
Ultimately, it comes down to the advice that goes with all of this cloned voice stuff is because one of the common things is, Mum, Dad, I've been arrested. I'm in jail. I need to make bail, etc., etc. I need you to send money to such a place, whatever it may be. It's very effective to use this on grandparents. There's been lots of examples of that have been happening just because less familiarity with the newer technology. But the advice around all of this is have a family password. Use the Ferrari executive example. Ask for some information that nobody else is going to know except for that person. It makes it far, far more difficult for anybody with malintent to get at you. Because these guys, I was talking to a colleague about this the other day, the majority of this kind of crime is crime of opportunity. Right? This is how exposed have people left themselves. How much resistance are they putting up to my ruse? And if you put up too much resistance, they will just give up. They'll go on to somebody else. They'll go on to the next easiest target that's going to be less effort. Because there's plenty of them. The other types of scam, there's the unsolicited call claiming to be family members. There's the turbocharged phishing. And a good segue into our next section does come down to those Elon Musk impersonations on YouTube. How are we spotting these deepfakes? What do you look for? Because I've got a few that I'm quite fond of trying to pick out.
I'm blessed with a life partner that is on the creative side, who drilled into me early on in our relationship just how hard it is to draw hands. So if there's something where if the video involves hands, that's going to be still, for many reasons, that go beyond, obviously, my knowledge of creativity and how to draw, because I cannot. Hands and eyes are still probably two of the biggest giveaways. If it's going to be something like this, where maybe they're just talking and they can get away with not having hands in the shot, then look at the eyes. I think those are your 2 go-tos, at least for me.
Yeah, you've now 2 of my 3 that I was going to say.
Yeah,
I mean, I've got a slightly more broader one. Hands, I completely wholeheartedly agree. I always remember watching something on BBC. It was an interview with David James, former England goalkeeper, and he's a very talented artist. And there was a segment of him where he's drawing someone's hand. And I remember my brother saying, Jesus, he's really good, because hands are so difficult to do. As you say, it's not just people that struggle with hands. It is also the AI generation models as well. For some reason, don't quite know why that is, but I've always thought this is to do with the proportions and where the creases are and the skin
and the joints and the creases and where light's going to hit is how she, God bless my wife. She tried to explain it to me, but I'm a complete and utter donkey when it comes to thinking about it, things in that way. So I said, yes, dear, but I remembered what she said. I think it's of that nature. Too many joints, the creases, the light hits stuff differently. Everything's changing, and you can change one little kind of move on one of the fingers, and it has an effect on all these other articulation points. on the hands,
Yeah.
right? That's why a lot of video game people wear gloves and stuff, right? You start picking up on these things once somebody opens their eyes a little bit.
Ah, yeah.
Not just because
I'm
they're
not.
cool assassins, it's because fingers and hands are just hard as hell to draw consistently, and I would imagine, of course, to animate then. Right? You add a whole other level of complexity to the game.
Yes.
So yeah, hands are my go-to.
Yeah, I'd never actually considered the lighting and the shadow sort of stuff. That is, if I recall correct, how a lot of deepfakes, not necessarily from looking at the hands per se, but how deepfakes are spotted by professionals is inconsistency with shadowing and light source and
Yeah,
that sort of thing. That reminds me of the Stanley Kubrick "Did They Fake the Moon Landing" piece, and it's no, they had to have done it for real because the way that Kubrick was such a perfectionist with lighting, it would have cost more to do it Kubrick's way than just to go to the moon.
it's,
Um,
it's yeah, you're not wrong. Stan had a reputation.
yeah, you would have needed an absolutely enormous array of small bulbs to create a non-point light source and make it look right. That's what I've read about it, and he wouldn't have tolerated the fact that it was wrong. So yeah, I agree with you. I wrote down here hands. Great way to spot a deepfake. If the hands don't look right, that's your signal to start looking for other stuff because they're just very, very difficult for the AI models to create. You said eyes. I'm going to extend that more broadly to the T-zone.
Yeah.
Right? Noses are quite difficult for the AI models to get done as well. But then I also noticed that more often than being cross-eyed, eyes are often wall-eyed. They'll go in different directions. And it's just once you get a feel for what they look like, it's really, really obvious, and you can start spotting them. It's practice. You can start spotting them more
Sure.
with more and more confidence. Now, there's caveats to that because
I giggle, Robin, at the T zone, right? Because I remember, I don't know if you struggled with acne as a kid, right? Like the T zone was one was one of the big, like, you gotta watch out. But now it's coming back. It's gonna save us all. Is our collective T zone knowledge? But yeah, man, it's hard. That was, when looking up the Ali Bongo story. I remember that those were two or three of the places that they were really trying to dissect the video. It was like, were there wrinkles? There's not
his
wrinkles on the
skin
T
was too
zone.
his skin was too smooth here. That's one of the ways that you catch me or Gordon Ramsay is here. If I'm too smooth on my forehead, it's a deep fake.
Same with me, man. I'm getting there. I'm getting there as well. It's getting to be a permacrease, right? So if you see suddenly, and I look like I did Botox, my friends, I'm gonna put this out there right now. I'm never doing that. So if I got the old smooth brow,
No,
it's not me. I've been body snatched. So.
I also had here text. Now this is one that comes with caveats on the grounds that some of these models, like obviously a text generation model, ChatGPT, is going to be very, very good at generating text, but that's what it's made for. The image models, I have seen stuff like DALL-E really struggle with creating text. I don't know quite why it is. I had a run-in with this specifically myself a few weeks ago. I just wanted to create some stock imagery for a news story about Delta that I posted on the Super Simple Cyber channel. And rather than, I was asking for a Delta logo in a certain style, instead it gave me a plane. I thought, actually, do you know what? The Delta plane will do. But when I looked a little bit closer at it, it tried to say Delta, but it was just 5 nonsense characters along the side of the plane. It was just kind of squiggles. I thought, do you know what? Nobody's going to look close enough at this that I'm actually going to care. And even if they do look close enough, I don't really care anyway. As long as you know that it's a Delta Airlines plane, that's fine. It's just an image for a news post. But text generation, for some reason, some of these models really, really struggle with.
Look, I think that there's different models for different applications, though. We haven't hit AGI at this point. So if you're looking at your generation of images, it's going to be trained and given kudos and reinforced along a different set of parameters than you would for straight up generating text. I did the same thing. I tried to do an infographic, just like in the style of a certain company that I'm a big fan of. And
Yeah.
it just came out with absolute nonsensical garbage. And unfortunately, my use case was I wanted to use it for something a little more official. So I said, oh, damn, I can't use this. This is nonsense.
Can't
This
do
is
that.
utter shite. Nope, exactly. Because this looks like a Gartner image on acid, right? Essentially, is what it came out to when I tried to generate one, like in the style of, gave it the prompt, and it was just like, talk about wall-eyed, right? It was just like, oh wow, look at all the pretty colors, like a Gartner infographic that melted, and just awful. So yeah, it's still not quite there yet. That is a really good giveaway as well. The text.
Yeah. Now there are caveats to this because dependent on these models generate what they do using, I'm trying to think of a better way to describe it than digital currency, but basically the amount of processing power that you get out of any of these models is dictated by how many tokens that you have to use, how much computing power you have been afforded when you send your prompt. And the more power that you have, the more time that you have, the better that you can make the model, because you go through more and more iterations of what it's doing. You have more opportunities for that adversarial part of the model to say, nope, bullshit, because the text doesn't look right. So this isn't to say that these images, when they are generated, are always going to have these flaws in the nose, the eyes, the T-zone, the hands, and the text. But it's a great place to start looking. After you've run out of those things to look for, you really need to start doing some separate research on a different platform to figure out whether what it is legitimate. Said probably about 5. You probably used the Elon Musk thing about 5 times now, but it's a really, really good example because that video was supposed to be a live stream. So if you go to Google and then say, oh, is Elon Musk doing a crypto live stream now with Cassie Wood? Shout out to possibly the most talented woman at losing money in finance. But if Google says, no, that's not a thing, that's not happening, then it's a scam. But the other thing as well and especially that I've seen with video, is where, and some models are getting better at this, but where the person who's being cloned, the person who's supposedly on this video, will not look at the lens of the camera, will look up, down, left, right, wherever. That's another giveaway in there. It's not a foolproof one. Some people have neurodivergent tendencies that dictate that they do not like making eye contact, be it with people or with a camera. But that's another one of those, because again, it just cannot necessarily get the eyes right. My other favorite bit, especially when this involves money, rich people didn't get rich by giving it all away on the internet. So any crypto investments or any other investments that are being peddled by like titans of industry on YouTube, 99.99% not legitimate.
What about the giving pledge, Robin? Come on, man. What about but that's what these
They're not giving to individuals who sign up to their YouTube stream.
You stop it right now. You don't know that. You do, actually. That's the whole point of this advice. I get it. But it's just, these things just have to have, like these things just have to have a tiny kernel of truth, and, be enough smoke and mirrors up front where people do fall for these. It's really sad, but it happens.
I think there's a protection against that I missed out earlier, which is, one of them is to try and mitigate your voice being cloned in the first place. Now, we've already said, if you've got video of you and audio of you up on the internet, then it's, you're not doing much about that. What goes up on the internet stays there forever. But one of the ways that your voice can get cloned is a lot of these scam calls that people will receive. So my personal advice on this one is, do not give them the opportunity to grab your voice. If you get a phone call from an unknown number and feel compelled to answer, don't say anything more than just a quick hello, or who's this, or something like that. But after that, stop speaking. They do not need much to create a convincing replica of your voice. Anything more than a syllable or two, and you're really giving them a good opportunity to have your voice used against you.
It just so happens that tis the season where our phones are going to get assaulted for all sorts of spammy stuff. At least I should say. So yeah, don't give them the opportunity to capture anything.
Yeah, I get 3 or 4 a day that don't even register on my phone. They're just like Apple silences them under the grounds of potential junk. I'm actually really, really thankful for that functionality in iOS.
Oh,
It's brilliant.
it's a game changer, Robin. You're correct. It's so nice.
Great. Rounding off then, and in a broader sense, we've given people tips on spotting these things and mitigating them, but in a broader sense, how do we mitigate the risks of deepfakes kind of as a society?
I think it's your training on this. You always really hone in on, regardless of the medium, regardless of the type of situation, if you start with looking at context, if you start with, are they trying to make you take urgent action on XYZ? Pump the brakes. Take a look. What is the context? Why are they calling you? What is the method behind the message here? The meaning. Why are they reaching out? How are they reaching out? Is this normally how they would? Right? If my mom calls me, my mom calls me. She's of the generation that still uses the darn phone. So okay, cool. If one of my nieces call me, it's either really, really important or it's something's up, something's fake. Right? It's one of those, they're gonna reach out, they're gonna text me. So it's just take all that into consideration and do your research. You pointed out very nicely, hey, on another platform, out of band, as we would say in the industry, double check the veracity of what's going on.
Yeah. I think all of that, everything that you said there, broadly goes to matter of public awareness and education around the whole thing, not having everybody asleep at the wheel and simply believing what they have pushed in front of their face without knowing the art of what is possible in terms of impersonation and fabrication. How much responsibility here it belongs to the tech industry?
I mean, you start running up this hill, running up this road, right? You start. What responsibility does a gun manufacturer? I had to. But what responsibility does a gun manufacturer have on how people use their guns? It's sadly, right? It's one of those. There's going to be good stuff here, and that's a wildly charged. You want a hot take, my friend? I got you one right there. But there's how you use it. There's going to be pluses and minuses to this technology. I've seen applications where technically what you would call a deepfake is used to help people mourn. Right, those are some things. If they can capture some media of somebody that you're going to lose, you can. I've seen some of that, and it's really heart wrenching. Again, now it turned into a dad. Now I'm complete and utter pushover softy. My heart is grown, and I hate it in a way. Right, life used to be simpler before, but so there's positive applications of this sort of thing. I don't know. I think potentially maybe some watermarking, some identification, some sort of technological veracity enhancing technology, right? Like checksum of some sort, how we would use to identify other media, possibly.
Finishing this off, do you think legislation and policy is a route around this, or is that too heavy-handed?
I think there needs to be...
Should there be repercussions for people who deliberately produce stuff with the intent to mislead?
Yes, 1,000%. I absolutely think so. If it's one thing, and that's going to be hard to prosecute anyway, to a certain extent. I think there's going to have to be some forensicing, some digital sleuthing to make sure. Of course, there's some entities that do this for a living, right? And we should prosecute them to the full extent of international law. I think we mentioned a bunch of those fine groups at the top of the show. But I do believe, and certainly I want to say, I want this to not be ever taken out of context, so I'll say it 100%. Like revenge porn should be 100% illegal. It is. It's getting more illegal in more ways. Oh, 1,000%. Just straight up revenge porn, but also then, of course, deepfake generated revenge porn, right? Putting, hated ex's face on some wild stuff. that should be illegal too, right? If you're knowingly creating it, disseminating it, like, no.
This is the problem that I get. I look at it in terms of the grey area of things that did not happen but were plausible, because you move along a continuum of this is clearly not real, clearly not real, clearly not real, clearly not real, and now it's like, now we're into the realms of, you go from effectively cartoon or 3D imagery, like as what video games look like, for example, or Pixar stuff. As you move along, you get into the realms of, oh, this now actually starts to look like real life. But even when it looks like real life, the scenario could be so absurd that it's clearly not real. Then once you move from there into something that is somewhat more plausible, where do you go from it being, this is obviously satire or a meme or stuff like that? Because satire, parody, memes, that's all protected. That's not a libel or scandal scenario. But where do you then cross that line? What's the situation with the grey area where it goes, well, this is now not sufficiently obvious to be parody, and now you are getting sued for it? And I don't think we can answer. Well, we can't answer that question, but it's a good one to ponder.
Sure, and I think that there's also a very real role that I feel a lot of, like you said, and I think it was a great point, the amplification services, social media. There's a role there. They just have to get better at moderating their content. My heart goes out to the poor folks, the humans that have to look at all this garbage that's out there. I don't think that's the answer, because then you end up giving these poor souls PTSD, and you're running through and you're not paying whatever you're paying them. It's not enough. So there has to be some tech answer and some responsibility on these platforms, on the purveyors of these platforms, to moderate their content a little bit better. I know that, like you said, and you brought up a great point with the free speech. I absolutely want that. I'm not saying, let's ban folks or let's this or let's that, but you should have some sort of content, a robust content moderation set of standards on each of these platforms that roots out at least the obvious bullshit. Like, let's at least get some, or the more incendiary stuff, and of course the harmful images as well. There's got to be a way.
Well, I mean, we're not going to hit it here, but yes, I agree. There has to be some method. I think it's just a matter of who's willing to spend enough time and money on the problem, and do they have any compelling reason to do so?
Is there a carrot? Easy, right? For is it going to make them money potentially? Right?
Yeah. I think so. It's easy, based on what we've said, everything that we've said so far. It's easy to simply decry generative AI as just not a net good. It's not true. There are some fantastic things that are being done with this technology. There are, specifically in the medical field, 4 years ahead of time detection of potential cancer, tumors developing. I've seen one of the earlier ones with even vaccine development for obscure diseases that would have taken many, many millions of dollars beyond what is commercially or financially realistic or viable, now can be done with generative AI models that weed out of all the hundreds of thousands of possibilities of compounds that could be used to cure specific illnesses, weeding them all the way down to maybe 100 possible compounds to test in real life, so that you don't have to go through this arduous sort of process of, down selection. That sort of stuff is really neat.
Magical.
Yeah, and it provides a neck. Anyway, right, on that bombshell, let's move on. Do you have a certification corner for us this week?
Yes, it's one that I'm gonna switch the style up here for our cert corner, and it's one that I'm currently in the midst of procuring. I'm giving it a try. Yeah. I'm not just a president. I'm a member, right? Hair Club for Men joke.
CyberDudes podcast episode 9. What is our certification corner that you are currently working your way through?
I'm excited. Change management professional. right? The Association of Change Management Professionals, certified change management professional. Very inventive
Cool.
for the name. It's very, very. But I have to
What do you
say,
do? Do you manage some sort of changes?
I think, and you do it professionally. I think is what the hope
Oh,
is. I
so
believe
not
so.
not for not for fun, not an amateur
Not for
thing as a
fun and
hobby.
profit, not amateurish way of managing changes, not willy nilly. Um, I I saw it, especially within technology. You might not think, of course, hey, this is CyberDudes podcast. What are you doing? Hey, when it comes to tech is change. Right? It's one of the most exciting things I think in our field, but it's also can be, of course, one of the most vexing. So, and I found out some stuff that I wanted to relay to our faithful listeners here, because I went into it thinking it was going to cost X. It costs
Hmm.
X plus. I still think the value is there, so I'm not saying that it's not. But this is, I would say, for those more mature in their journey. Right, this is not necessarily going to be the thing that differentiates you and gets you that first cyber job or the second cyber job. But if you want to then say, hey, I want to have more of a say in the roadmaps
Hmm.
of where we take my organization or what we're going to be trying to target or create down the road. This has been a very valuable set of learnings for myself. Going to price, going to costing, that tidbit I brought up. It's going to be a little bit pricey. Roughly, all in, it's going to cost about $1,500, and that's split two ways. There's specific hours that you have to put in to show. You have to take a course essentially, and it's not
Yeah.
a course offered by the association. It's there's third party partners that do it. You go through. I have to say though, man, these courses are pretty legit. There's stuff I'm using in my day to day right now. There's things it's one of those. It's still, I would say, still worth it. The value is still there. But I originally had budgeted that this was going to be about $750, $800. It's about twice that, right? $1,500, $1,600, because the course is something that you need to take. You also have to
Yep.
have about 4,200 hours of change management experience. So, and I'm in the midst of, I put down the work we do, the work I've done in the past at where we work, because it's,
Yep.
again, any project has been changed. There's things you have to do. You have to generate, you have to go through the whole change life cycle. But 4,200 hours, that's, more than a year's worth, year and a half's worth. If you consider every day, all day is change. So it's a big chunk of
Yeah.
experience. None of it I've seen, at least from my experience, you can that through the process of applying, none of it can be taken out of. It can be reduced by degrees.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there's that. I do think, if I remember correctly, and it's sad. I'm sorry, faithful listeners here. I just did this, but this one point I would have to verify again. I do think you need a 4-year degree for this one. I think it's one of
Oh.
those, or the hours increase. Right, it's
Yeah.
one of those. But the 4,200 is still the hard cap, no matter what. Even with a 4-year, you have to put that in. You answer 3 questions for the application experience. It reminded me. I'll say this, and this is one we could talk about down the road, of the PMP, project management professional, where on the application you answer a bunch of essay style questions.
Yeah.
But the learning has been great. I'm applying it day to day. It's been pretty valuable in terms of change management and the pace of technology, things changing every day. How to kind of get folks on the
Hmm.
bandwagon for things that need to change, or identifying that things do need to change up front. That's part of the life cycle. So yeah, I've been having a blast, and hopefully I get a thumbs up from the association, and then I can sit for the exam. So no, I took the course, paid the money there to get the hours. I
Yep.
applied to be able to sit for the exam, and that was a process and another payment. And if they come back and say, yes, the hours are up to snuff, your experience is up to snuff, your answers on the essay questions were pretty legit,
Hmm.
now I can sit and I can schedule it and sit for it. So in that case, I will say again, it reminds me of the PMP, the PGMP, that sort of, you can't just schedule it without getting the okay from the
Yeah.
organization. Yeah.
Whew, that's hefty.
It's the last one of the year, Robin. Everything else for me that I'll take. Yeah, it's a sad day. But it's the last one for me for the year. All the other ones that I'll try, are just, like cloud ones that are pretty inexpensive. Just taking hacks, seeing if I still have the skills are sharp and whatnot. There's a new AI one that we could talk about from AWS. That's
Ooh,
in
very
beta.
nice.
I scheduled that for
Of course you
middle
did.
of September, right? And because it's beta, it's cheaper. So I'll, that could be our next one. I could report back on how that went.
That's cool.
When, yeah. So, but this is
Yeah,
the
let's do
last
that.
major one for the year. Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. We'll have to be doing some. You have to look through your archives of what else you've got, or start researching things that you've not even considered taking.
That'd be fun. Either way, right? We'll see if people want to drop in the comments, things they had questions on,
Yeah.
certs they're thinking of taking. There's one I haven't taken that's really intriguing. They finally, TCM Security just dropped a blue team one. That's
Ooh.
pretty earth shattering. Yeah, because again, it's all IR, or it's all red team. There's some GRC from there, and it's blue
Yeah.
team certs are they're few and far between. There are a couple now, right? But I remember when there were none, and that
Yeah.
was pretty recent. So now the TCM. So if y'all want us to take a deep dive there, I'll take a look. I'll do my research, or we can bring somebody on that will take it, or that is in the field that wants to. Let us know. We'll do our due diligence for you.
Beautiful. Excellent. Good stuff. All right. Well, that was Certification Corner on episode 9. Episode 10, again, we will be back in another 2 weeks. Our next episode is going to be a bit of a surprise, and we're going to deviate from type. We are anticipating a guest, an incident responder who we work with, who's, let's just say, there's an interesting background, an interesting number of topics that we can go into. So we need to make sure we are doubly confirmed on that episode with that chap in question. He can be a difficult man to pin down to a specific time.
Everybody wants him.
Everybody does want him. He's a very talented man. It's also partly the nature of the job. Things can just come up last minute, and unfortunately, we would have to take a back seat. But that shall be our next episode, episode 10. It'll be interview with an incident responder, in effect. On that bombshell, it's been a wonderful couple of hours of recording, at least. Our actual episode will be shorter than this. It's been a wonderful time talking to you, Omar, and I'm looking forward to next time.
Thanks for having me, Robin. It's always a pleasure.
Marvelous, good stuff. We'll see you again in episode 10. Bye-bye.
Adios.